tell me what it was like in California in that time, because I think people had such different experiences depending on where in the world you were at that time. And I know that California was one of the crazier parts of the USA. I did spend some time there in 2021. I went through 2021. I think I went to 10 different US states throughout all the nonsense. And I definitely had some very weird experiences in California, including being kicked out of a couple restaurants. So I'm curious as to what it was like on the ground there, being in the actual restaurant business.
Well, being in the restaurant business, it was not as difficult because I'm actually in Orange County, so I was south of LA. We had a lot of people leaving LA to come to Orange County. But just generally in California, there was that tribal perspective on everything, right? Obviously like the masks and the vaccines and all that, and the distancing and how dare you, you grandma killer, et cetera. But it was also just very that you brought up sports, and I think that's interesting because what I noticed in California was with sports being shut down, all the people who the fantasy football guys, the guys that were, oh, everything is sports, right? We all have those friends who all they know is sports. In the absence of sports, they turn to politics because it's sport like. So the people that, we're all about like this football team or that football team, now they're all about like Pelosi or Trump. And they took all the energy that they otherwise would have for sports and they threw it into politics, which really exacerbated that division that I'm kind of defining here. And you saw it very clearly, especially in the Los Angeles general metropolitan area. From a restaurant perspective, we were up against the state, we were up against community, we were up against individuals. When I spoke out, the breaking point for me was when they shut down outdoor dining in beautiful, sunny Southern California, 75 degrees and sunny, and they closed outdoor dining because they said you could spread COVID. And that was absurd. So we stayed open, and I had people threatening me, the family, the kids, people showing up. We had like that, kind of the Antifa group come and spray paint our business. They didn't know why they did, but it was like they were probably paid agitators, and I was on a list somewhere. So it was pretty intense. But for me, the thing that frustrated me was the policy piece of it because Gavin Newsom shut down outdoor dining. Going into the holidays, it was December like 6th, and all these people got fired from their jobs in the restaurant industry because that was the last hope was like outdoor dining.
Just to be clear, Andrew, is this 2020 or 2021?
This was December of 2020 going into 2021. So it was like that second wave, if you recall. They shut down outdoor dining. All these people lose their jobs. So we start bringing all these employees on that we couldn't even afford, frankly. And then we started raising a little bit of money. We were like, oh, well, let's raise like $5,000 from friends and we'll use our business to raise money for struggling out of work restaurant workers. Because when they applied for unemployment, Newsom and the Newsom administration said, well, you'll be approved, but you're not going to get the money until we get the federal refresh in 2021. So sorry, going into the holidays, you can't pay rent, you can't pay electricity, you can't do anything. That's when we started our restaurant fund, 86 Restaurant Struggle. And we ended up, like I said, we thought we'd raise $5,000. We'd give away 10 checks for $500 for people to pay rent, buy Christmas gifts, what have you. We ended up raising almost $600,000 over a 5-month period and distributing all of that in like $500 checks across the country. Christmas Eve, I was driving around we had a newborn. I was driving around with me, the newborn, all the kids, literally handing checks to people's landlords to pay their rent going into the holidays.
Well, tell me a little bit more about, I mean, you mentioned that you faced, obviously there was backlash, but you mentioned there were even threats. I mean, I can believe it, but it sounds kind of crazy. So can you just like talk me through that a little bit more? Like what happened?
Yeah, so it's always subject related. So when we stayed open, we got the threats from just the general COVIDians that were like, you're crazy, you're killing grandma, you're a public health risk, your restaurant should be shut down, we're going to boycott you, all that basic stuff, right? Like that doesn't scare me at all. Then I remember I went on Tucker Carlson and I talked about how it was like a month later about how all the money that was coming in through the PPP and all this government stimulus money was actually encouraging people not to work. And that's when I started getting hit by the more kind of socialist groups that were like, you're a bad business owner. Like we're coming after you. We're targeting you. We're going to, watch your back. Like we know your address, posting my address, showing up at the place of business, because they're an organized group that tries to educate via fear, right? And I say educate loosely, I'm being sarcastic. And they try and scare you into shutting up.
Isn't that called terrorism?
Yeah, it's called terrorism, exactly.
I I mean, it does. This is political, I guess. So, how do you think we got to a stage? I mean, I'm looking at what's even going on right now as we record this in the USA, and I sometimes wonder, how did we get to a stage where a large chunk of people on the left, whether they are politicians or they are just everyday people, have become so pro-establishment, right? They've gone from, fight the man, fight the power, fight the machine, to quite literally being sort of mouthpieces and enforcers of the most corrupt, like they're the most corrupt administrations and sectors of the population. It's been such a it's so odd to me. Like during that whole period I refer to personally as the scamdemic, I was just sort of mind blown when, you had these people going out and, team Pfizer and team Moderna, and they're all pro big pharma. And even in the world of music and entertainment, people who you might have thought previously were like, they had certainly the image of being rebellious, and they're having vaccine passports at their concerts, and they're forcing the mask mandates, and they're using their social media to put people on blast who are not going along with all this thing. How do you think that switch happened? And I say that especially because someone who spent a lot of time in California, which is known as one of the most sort of liberal and progressive places on earth. I don't know what those terms mean these days, but it does seem like there has been an actual change.
Well, we were at ground zero, so I got to see the wave building, right? The tidal wave before it crashed all over the rest of the country and subsequently the world. I think what happens, I look at this as any kind of social movement. There's always two groups of people, right? You've got like the useful idiots who are just repeating the narrative and the propaganda. And then you have a few people at the top who are just the ones that are like distilling all of that information for their own gain. I think about the incentive structure. What's the incentive structure there? And the incentive structure on behalf of all these people, it was just power, right? Fear is so addictive because fear begets power. And when power is in the hands of those people who want to get more power and are especially within the context of the government, then it's a real opportunity that they don't want to miss out on. So, like a restaurateur, if I'm moving into a holiday, it's like, oh, we got to make all of our money during this holiday. If I'm in the government and I want bigger government and there's something happening in which a lot of people are fearful, it's like, well, we have to take advantage of this opportunity as quickly as possible to get as much power, and then we won't give it up, right? So that's what I think the incentive structure was there. And with power comes money, right? So some of those people within that power structure were obviously motivated by money. And we talk about pharma, right? It's obviously it's like big pharma. I mean, they were paying people. That's 100% documented. So then there's the money, and there's the fear, and then there's the useful idiots that look up to these people as their icons. It's a religion to some degree, and they are obviously, the priests of this religion, or whatever analogy you want to use, and whatever they tell you, and they're good too, right? Like that's what I say. Everybody's like, "Oh, Gavin Newsom's an idiot." No, he's not. He's a very smart guy who speaks eloquently and is incredibly manipulative. And it he's brilliant at what he does because he's able to get so many people on board to turn the other way, even though they see him dining at French Laundry and breaking his own rules, and he says, no, 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 that's not happening. And they're like, okay, you're right, that's not happening you know
What a crazy time. I mean, 4 years later, what do you think about when you reflect on it? Because I have so many thoughts from that period, and, I don't there's a part of me that kinda wants to stop talking about it and not bring it up anymore, but I think it's important to occasionally reflect on it, partly because I don't want humanity, certainly in my
Mhm.
lifetime, to ever get sucked into that type of whew, psychosis, mass formation. I don't even know the correct term, but it was insane. And I don't want people to forget how insane it was and forget how people behaved and just how divisive some people got, how nasty it got, because there has not been any accountability. There has not
Nope.
been any um, justice, for people who are, people like to talk about justice and social justice and all that. It's like, okay, can we have some actual justice on that one, not just in California or just in the USA, but this happened across the world. like across Europe, across North America, across South America, many parts of Asia. It's like outside. I mean, most African countries didn't do all this nonsense. I think South Africa did, but most of them were just like, "Is it worse than malaria? No, okay, carry on." Um,
Yeah.
but it's so weird. It's kind of been memory hold. And I don't think we should allow that to happen. I think it's important to, at a minimum, remind people and see what lessons we've learned. So 4 years later, we're in a very different timeline, it looks like. And it looks like we're on a very different trajectory. But what do you think and feel as you reflect on it?
Doesn't feel like 4 years, it feels like yesterday to me, and I'll make sure that that remains the case. And obviously, I'm not out there talking about it every day because I think that then it becomes a trite message. However, we need to remember what happened and how quickly so many people were willing to turn on not just their neighbors, but their friends and family, and we're still seeing that. And you're right, there has not been a reconciliation in any degree.
This episode is brought to you by Sambrosa, the best way to get your 8 hours of rest. If, like me, you sometimes struggle with nighttime restlessness and allergies, then Sambrosa Night Syrup could be a game changer for you. Sambrosa contains a natural base of 7 organic herbs, honey, and a small amount of antihistamine. It's effective and soothing with no harsh chemicals, no high fructose corn syrup, and no artificial flavors or dyes. I've been using Sambrosa for several months now, and I can personally vouch for its effectiveness when it comes to improving my quality of rest at night. I also love the fact that they're a family-owned company who share my values of faith, freedom, and integrity. My listeners can try Sambrosa today and get 10% off by going to sambrosa.com/Zuby10. That's SAMBROSA.com/Zuby10 for 10% off your order. Try Sambrosa today and wake up ready to embrace life's opportunities. Go to sambrosa.com/Zuby10 and try it out.